Have you ever looked out at the ocean and felt that sense of infinite possibility? Stared into its endless blue and imagined the world teeming just beneath the surface? We see clips of vibrant coral reefs, bursting with a kaleidoscope of life, or massive schools of fish moving as one shimmering entity. We hear the haunting, beautiful songs of whales echoing across entire ocean basins. It feels eternal, powerful, an engine of life that has run for billions of years. But what if I told you that this intricate, noisy, living world is more fragile than a house of cards? What if I told you that it's already starting to fall silent? It's not one single thing, but a death by 1,000 cuts. For decades, we've pulled fish from the sea faster than they can reproduce, effectively hunting the ocean's great predators to the brink of extinction. At the same time, our climate is warming the waters and, perhaps more insidiously, changing its very chemistry. The ocean is becoming more acidic, a slow-motion poison for any creature that builds a shell or a skeleton. This isn't just about losing a few species here and there. This is a trophic cascade, a domino effect where cutting one thread unravels the entire web, from the mightiest shark down to the smallest plankton. Imagine diving into what was once a bustling coral metropolis, but instead of color and motion, you find only silence and bone-white skeletons. These are the ghost reefs, eerie, silent graveyards stretching for miles, where the only sound is the gentle tap of rubble in the current. Now drift out into the open ocean, the great blue desert. It's a desert that was once crossed by highways of migrating tuna, sharks, and whales. But now it's just empty. The deep, resonant songs that once defined the acoustic landscape of the ocean are gone, replaced by a profound and unsettling quiet. The planet's heart is still beating, but it's becoming faint. This system-wide shutdown starts at the bottom and tears its way to the top. The microscopic phytoplankton, the tiny forests of the sea that produce half the oxygen we breathe, are struggling to survive in these warmer, more acidic conditions. As they falter, the krill that feed on them starve. And when the krill are gone, everything that eats them, the fish, the seals, the great whales, vanishes too. It's a chain reaction of extinction, a great dying that is happening on our watch. So what happens when the kings are dead and their kingdom is left in ruins? What happens when the silence becomes absolute? But here is where the story takes a turn. This isn't just a eulogy for a lost world. In nature, a vacuum is never tolerated for long. Every mass extinction in Earth's history wasn't an ending, but a violent and chaotic reset. It's a clearing of the slate that allows new, previously suppressed forms of life to explode into the emptiness and compete for the throne. The silence we're beginning to hear isn't the sound of an ending. It's the sound of the world holding its breath, waiting for the next act to begin. The question is no longer if life will recover, but what it will become. This isn't a story of extinction. It's a story of succession. The stage is being cleared for a new cast of characters, players who have been waiting in the evolutionary wings for millions of years, perfectly suited for a world that is hotter, more acidic, and emptier. They won't play by the old rules of speed, grace, and majesty. Theirs will be a game of resilience, opportunism, and monstrous adaptation. The great oceanic silence is just a prelude. Nature is about to provide a terrifying answer to the question of what comes next, and it will be nothing like the world we thought we knew. So, the giants have fallen, and silence has descended upon the seas. In this vast, empty cathedral, who are the first to step forward and claim the throne? The answer isn't something grand or majestic. It's not a new breed of super shark or a hyper-intelligent whale. The inheritors of this new ocean are the meek, the ancient, the ones who were always there, waiting in the shadows. They are the survivors who thrive on chaos, the ones for whom our apocalypse is a golden opportunity. Welcome to the reign of the primordials. Welcome to the age of slime. First among these new rulers are the jellyfish. Think of them. They have no brain, no bones, no blood. They are little more than a pulsating bell of gelatin, a simple nerve net, and a cluster of stinging tentacles. They are perfectly designed for a broken world. Warmer waters? They love it. It speeds up their life cycle. More acidic seas that dissolve shells? They don't have shells. fewer fish to compete with or eat their young. That's paradise. In the absence of their predators and competitors, their populations don't just grow. They explode with biblical intensity, a biological flash flood that consumes the coastlines. Try to picture it. A beach, but instead of sand, you see a heaving, shimmering carpet of gelatinous bodies stretching to the horizon. The tide doesn't bring in waves, but a thick, viscous slurry of living slime. The air is thick with the smell of salt and decay. These aren't just the jellyfish we know. They are swarms of 1 trillion individuals, a single superorganism of mindless hunger. They form a pulsating, stinging biomass miles wide and hundreds of feet deep, a living, breathing blanket that suffocates everything beneath it. This isn't just an ecosystem, it's a planetary-scale infestation, and they are not alone. Joining them are their ghostly cousins, the salps and pyrosums. Salps are barrel-shaped, transparent filter feeders that form chains, sometimes hundreds of feet long, like spectral spines drifting in the dark. Pyrosums, the fire bodies, are colonial tubes of jelly that glow with an eerie, constant bioluminescence, transforming the night sea into a haunted landscape of moving light. Together with the jellyfish, they create a new gelatinous food web. They are the grazers, the predators, and the landscape all at once. The ocean has reverted to a primordial state, dominated by the same simple life that ruled it 600 million years ago. Beneath this suffocating surface layer, on the seabed, another ancient power is rising. Vast, colorful carpets of microbial mats begin to spread across the continental shelves. These are complex communities of bacteria and archaea, the oldest forms of life on our planet. In an ocean with less oxygen, these anaerobic organisms thrive. They paint the seafloor in shades of purple, green, and orange, consuming chemicals and releasing toxic hydrogen sulfide. The world has been turned upside down. The life that once hid in the mud and the darkest corners of the earth is now claiming the sunlit world. So, is this it? Is this the final chapter for our planet's oceans? A global swamp of stinging jelly, glowing tubes, and poisonous mats? An ecosystem with no intelligence, no complexity, just endless, mindless replication. It's a horrifying thought that all the evolutionary progress of 500 million years could be wiped away, replaced by a planetary monoculture of slime. But look closer. This unimaginable biomass, this endless buffet of soft-bodied creatures, represents the single largest concentration of food the world has ever seen. And in nature, a feast like that never, ever goes uneaten for long. The real question is, what kind of monster evolves to hunt a planet of ghosts? So the world is drowning in a gelatinous tide, a silent, stinging apocalypse. A feast of unimaginable proportions lies waiting. But how do you hunt a ghost? How does life adapt to fight an enemy that is 95% water, armed with millions of tiny venomous harpoons? The answer, as always in evolution, is beautifully brutal. Life fights back not with grace, but with monstrous innovation. From the muck and the mire of the seabed, the first challengers rise, and they are nothing like the heroes we might have imagined. These are the scavengers and the shellbreakers. Let's start with a creature that already exists today, a living nightmare from the ocean floor, the bobbit worm. It's a polychaete worm, an iridescent ambush predator that buries itself in the sand, leaving only its 5 antennae exposed. When prey swims by, it lunges with such incredible speed and force that it can snap a fish in two with its razor-sharp, retractable jaws. Now, imagine this creature in a world where its main food source is a dense, endless curtain of jellyfish. Evolution goes to work. Freed from the constraints of a balanced ecosystem, these worms grow to horrifying sizes. Picture a polychaete worm no longer measured in feet, but in dozens of feet. Imagine it the size of a car, or even a city bus, its body coiled beneath the seafloor. It no longer waits for a single fish. It waits for the shadow of a jellyfish bloom to pass overhead. Then, in a violent explosion of sand and fury, it erupts, its massive jaws clamping down on tons of gelatinous flesh, dragging the screaming, stinging mass down into its burrow to be devoured. These are not hunters. They are living traps, the first line of defense against the slime, turning the jelly's greatest strength, their sheer numbers, into a fatal weakness. But worms are soft-bodied. In this new, hostile ocean, being soft is a death sentence. This is where the second contender enters the ring. The humble gastropod, the sea snail. We think of snails as slow, passive grazers, but some, like the cone snail, are already sophisticated venomous predators, firing a harpoon-like tooth called a radula to disable their prey. In a world dominated by tough jellies and armored worms, this basic blueprint is supercharged. Evolution favors defense, giving rise to a new dynasty of mobile fortresses, the shellbreakers. These are not your garden snails. Imagine a gastropod with a shell as thick as medieval armor, reinforced with minerals drawn from the acidic water, making it almost indestructible. They crawl across the seabed like living tanks, impervious to the stinging swarms and the toxic sludge. Their radula is no longer just a small tooth, but a massive, chitinous harpoon they can fire with explosive force, powerful enough to punch through the thick bell of a giant jelly or even the armored hide of a competing predator. They are the new heavily armed cavalry of the seafloor. An arms race has begun. The giant worms evolve tougher hides and more potent venoms to defend against the snails. In turn, the shellbreakers develop even thicker armor and more powerful harpoons. The ocean is no longer a realm of sleek, fast swimmers, but a battlefield for alien, armored brutes. The new rules of survival are simple. Be tougher, be more venomous, or be eaten. Speed and agility have been replaced by brute force and siege warfare. But this new war is a war of individuals, of solitary monsters fighting for scraps. And in evolution, there is always a more efficient way to win. What happens when the next step isn't to build a better individual, but to abandon the very idea of I for the terrifying power of we? The seafloor has become a medieval battlefield, populated by armored brutes and giant ambush worms locked in a brutal, individualistic war. It's a world of brute force, venom, and chitin. But this kind of one-on-one combat is inefficient, a massive expenditure of energy for every meal. Evolution, in its relentless search for an edge, always finds a better way. And the next leap forward is as profound as it is terrifying. It's the moment life decides that the individual, I, is obsolete, and the future belongs to the collective we. The age of the solitary monster is over. The age of the hive is about to begin. The blueprint for this revolution already exists in our oceans today, in the form of siphonophores. These are creatures like the Portuguese man-o'-war, which looks like a single animal but is actually a colony. It's an organism made of other organisms, a superentity built from thousands of genetically identical clones called zooids. Each zooid is a specialist. Some form the float, others are stinging tentacles, some handle digestion, others reproduction. They are so specialized that none can survive on their own, but together they form a single, cohesive, and highly effective predator. Now, imagine evolution taking that cooperative blueprint and pushing it to its absolute limit in an ocean teeming with food. What emerges is not just a long chain, but a city. A living, thinking net, miles wide and thousands of feet deep. It is a super colony, a scyphozoan shroud, that drifts silently through the mid-ocean, a gossamer curtain of translucent flesh and nerves. It is almost invisible, a shimmering distortion in the water, a ghost that is also a predator. The sheer scale is difficult to comprehend. It's a single, colonial organism that could blot out the sun for the ecosystems below, a living storm front that moves with a slow, inexorable purpose. Its arrival isn't announced by a roar, but by a chilling, spreading shadow. This living web doesn't hunt in any way we would recognize. It doesn't chase, stalk, or ambush. It simply exists and moves. Banks of propulsion zooids, each a tiny jet, pulse in perfect unison to steer the entire colony through the currents, driving it towards the richest feeding grounds. The rest of the net is a matrix of sensory, stinging, and digestive zooids. When anything, a shellbreaker, a school of smaller creatures, even a giant worm, blunders into this wall of life, the response is instantaneous and overwhelming. Millions of stinging cells fire at once, paralyzing the prey. Then, the digestive zooids press in, beginning to dissolve the victim externally, absorbing the nutrients directly into the colossal network. The true horror of this entity, however, is not its method of hunting, but the question of its mind. A single siphonophore has a simple nerve net. But what happens when you link millions of them together across a multi-mile-wide body? Does a new form of consciousness flicker into existence? Not a centralized brain, but a distributed intelligence, a mind spread across the entire colony. Each zooid is a single neuron, and the whole is a planet-sized brain. Is it self-aware? Does it feel the struggles of the creatures it dissolves? What does a creature that is a we instead of an I even want? It is the ultimate alien, a thinking ecosystem whose motivations are utterly unknowable. This supercolony represents a new apex in the food chain. It is almost invulnerable. Attacking it is like trying to punch the ocean itself. It outcompetes the solitary brutes not through strength, but through overwhelming collective efficiency. It is the ultimate expression of life in this new ocean, a testament to the power of cooperation taken to a monstrous extreme. But even this living, thinking net has a weakness. Its existence depends entirely on the life of the upper ocean. Far below, in the crushing dark of the abyss where the sun has never reached, something is stirring. Something that doesn't need the light. Something that has been evolving in isolation for millennia and is about to rise. Up in the sunlit layers, a new and terrible ecosystem thrives. The living nets and armored killers wage their wars in a world remade. But their entire existence, from the jellyfish blooms to the hive minds, is still tied to the sun. Far below them lies a realm the sun has never touched, the abyss. For eons, this deep, dark world survived on the scraps from above. A constant, gentle rain of dead plankton, dead whales, and waste known as marine snow. But now, with the old ecosystem gone, the rain has stopped. The abyss is starving to death. In this dying, crushing darkness, however, there are sparks of defiance. Around hydrothermal vents, cracks in the planet's crust spewing superheated, mineral-rich water, life has always played by a different set of rules. Here, in these oases of searing heat, the foundation of life isn't sunlight, but chemistry. This is chemosynthesis. Armies of specialized bacteria consume toxic chemicals like hydrogen sulfide and methane, and in turn, they become the food source for a bizarre menagerie of creatures. Giant tube worms with blood-red plumes, pale crabs, and ghost white fish. They are powered not by the sun, but by the raw geothermal heart of the earth itself. But these oases are small and far apart. As the rest of the abyss starves, the pressure on these vent communities becomes immense. Evolution, faced with a crisis, makes a radical leap. If you can't wait for food to come to you, and your food source is fixed to a spot on the floor, what's the solution? You learn to take your food source with you. The revolution from the abyss begins not with a predator, but with a farmer. A mobile bioreactor. A creature that carries an entire chemosynthetic ecosystem inside its own body. Meet the geothermal grazer. Imagine a creature the size of a small building, with a low-slung, heavily armored body plated with minerals it extracts from the crust. It has no eyes. It has no need for them in a world of absolute black. Instead, its entire body is a sophisticated chemical sensor, tasting the water for the faintest trace of methane seeps or sulfide-rich sediments. It moves with an unnerving geological slowness, an inch at a time, crawling across the abyssal plains. It is not an animal in the traditional sense. It is a living refinery, an engine of geology given flesh, powered by the garden of ancient bacteria it cultivates in its gut. For millennia, these beings have thrived in their isolated world, growing larger, more efficient, and spreading across the ocean floor. They are a completely separate tree of life, born from darkness and heat. But the abyssal plains are not infinite. As their populations grow, they exhaust the easily accessible chemical seeps. Competition drives them to seek new territory, to explore beyond the bottom of the world. And so, for the first time in their evolutionary history, they begin to move in a new direction. Up. They start their great migration into the vast, empty, black water column above them. A revolution is climbing from the depths. These alien forms of life, which have never known the sun or the creatures that depend on it, are rising. They are ascending into the territories now dominated by the gelatinous hives and shellbreakers. What happens when these two completely separate evolutionary experiments, one born of light and one of darkness, finally meet in the twilight zone? What happens when the slow, unstoppable, chemical-powered life from the abyss encounters the fast, biological, sun-powered life from the surface? The abyss is coming up for air, and it's bringing its monsters with it. The pieces are all on the board. The sunlit world is a churning battleground of armored snails, giant worms, and vast, thinking nets of flesh. From the eternal darkness below, the slow, chemical-powered behemoths of the abyss are ascending. The world is poised on a knife's edge, a chaotic maelstrom of wildly different forms of life, each a monster in its own right. So what happens now? Who claims the top of this twisted, broken food chain? The answer is that there is no single throne. A new pantheon of apex predators has emerged, each a god in its own terrifying domain. First, rising from the lineage of the shellbreakers, comes the kraken slug. In the arms race of armor, it made the most radical move. It abandoned its shell completely. That fortress had become a prison, limiting its speed, its flexibility, and its mind. Now freed, it is a creature of pure muscle and intellect. The size of a bus, its boneless body can squeeze through any gap, and its skin is a canvas of chromatophores, allowing it to become invisible at will. It is a ghost with a genius mind, and it has set its sights on the most formidable prey in the ocean, the colonial hives. It cannot fight the living net with brute force. To touch the hive is to be stung to death and dissolved. So it doesn't. The kraken slug is a master of chemical warfare. It synthesizes complex neurotoxins not to kill, but to confuse. It will approach a hive and release a targeted plume of chemicals that mimics the hive's own communication signals, but broadcasts pure chaos. The hive's distributed mind shorts out, zooids firing at random, propulsion systems fighting each other. The living net tears itself apart in confusion, and only then does the kraken slug move in, picking off the disorganized, helpless clusters of flesh. It's a battle of intelligence against intelligence, a ghost against a god. Meanwhile, from the abyss, the second apex has arrived. The geothermal grazer, having ascended into the midwater, has evolved into the abyssal tyrant. It is a slow, unstoppable force of nature, a living chemical reactor that has no concept of haste. Its armored body is now even larger, and it no longer needs the seafloor. It has become a neutrally buoyant fortress, a walking piece of the planet's core drifting in the cold darkness. The horror of this creature lies not in its aggression, but in its profound and utter indifference. It does not hunt. It simply proceeds. The abyssal tyrant senses the world purely through chemistry. The waste products of every living thing are a trail it can follow, a scent on the water. When it detects a concentration of life, be it a lone kraken slug or a section of a hive, it moves toward it. It doesn't bite or grasp. It projects a field around itself, an aura of highly reactive enzymes and acids cultivated by the chemosynthetic bacteria within. Anything that enters this field is simply undone. Flesh, armor, and bone are unmade at a molecular level, dissolving into a nutrient slurry that the tyrant absorbs through its skin. It is death by proximity, a silent, passionless erasure. But even these titans are not the ultimate winners. Through every stage of the apocalypse, one lineage not only survived but thrived. They were smart enough to avoid the first swarms of jellies, clever enough to outwit the armored worms, and adaptable enough to navigate the rise of both the hives and the abyssal horrors. They are the descendants of the octopus and the cuttlefish. They are the neurocephalopods, and they are the true inheritors of the ocean. Possessing a large, complex brain, unparalleled camouflage, and dexterous, manipulative tentacles, they were perfectly suited for a world of chaos. They are the ultimate generalists in a world of extreme specialists. They learned to hunt the hunters. They use tools to pry open the shellbreakers, set intricate traps for the kraken slugs using salvaged pieces of the hives, and have even learned to recognize the chemical precursors of the abyssal tyrant's digestive field, staying clear of its path. They are the new sentience of the seas, the masterminds operating in the shadows of the lumbering gods. And so the new ecosystem finds its balance. It is a world ruled by a triumvirate of monsters: the cunning of the kraken slug, the inexorable power of the abyssal tyrant, and the sharp, strategic intelligence of the neurocephalopod. The ocean is no longer silent. It is filled with the clicks, chemical signals, and light flashes of beings more alien than we could have ever conceived. We looked upon the ocean we had broken and saw only an end. But it was just the beginning. We broke their world. This is the world evolution built in its place. And it has no memory of us at all.